Have either one of you ever been to Disney World?
Not since I was about 7 or 8 years old.
That's not surprising. I was just curious. I mean, like...
No, that's a lie. I just remembered. Me and my friend Debbie went, when I was about 25. She lives in Florida, so I went and visited her. She's like, let's go to Disney. So we drove for like the day. Completely forgot about that. Well, and we didn't go on any rides. We just walked around. So,
wow, that's an expensive walk around.
Yeah. We just.
I mean, back then it was probably a lot cheaper, but
yeah, but no.
So
it seems like a lot of work for a vacation.
I don't know how you guys would ever be in the situation to go, and I know that neither one of you probably would ever do it on your own volition, and it's overwhelming from the amount of people and the amount of stimuli that's just around you all the time. But if you ever find yourself in the area and you just want to get some like creative, you talk about doing your walks and you like take in creative stuff. If you were to go to Disney World, maybe even like some sort of tour or something, and just walk around and look at the details in this massive county of creativity, you would walk away with so much stuff in your brain. Because it is, a big picture, you look at the whole thing, it's noise, it's loud, it's bright, it's food, it's cost, it's that. And then you zoom into, why did they put this thing right here? Oh, it's because they want to direct people subtly to do this. Or they want to make you stand in this perspective and look at that mountain and it seems bigger than it actually is. Because, it's stuff like that everywhere. It's pretty unbelievable. I was in Disney this week, in case you didn't.
Were you? No.
Didn't catch that. Yeah, we went spring break. My oldest is in the marching band, and so they got to march through Magic Kingdom.
Oh, that's cool.
And so we took a school trip down, and the family just went. It's a cheaper way for us to go, so the whole family went, and we just had, how many days? I don't know, a bunch of days in the parks. Went to all the parks. Went to Universal and stood in lots of lines, but had a blast, had a really good time together. And yeah. And like I said, I don't know how you guys would ever end up in that situation.
If they hired me to do a YouTube video about Disneyland, I would do it.
But it is
that's not happening though at this point.
It is really, really fascinating to see the amount of effort that goes into the simplest things down there.
I do remember when I was a child, and I'm thinking about it now as you're talking about it. When I was a young child, maybe 7 or 8 years old, we had a family trip down there, and we stayed at a brand new hotel. And I remember thinking to myself, this hotel is dedicated to that park, like the magnitude of like this place.
Yeah.
So many people come here. I had the wherewithal. I must have been like closer to 10 years old. I had the wherewithal to realize like this park is such a massive place that it has its own hotel, and it probably has 20 hotels now.
Oh yeah.
And I do remember walking around, and my cousins who lived down there, they were saying there's a secret underground to run the park, and we would see lights between tracks of some of the rides, and my cousins would be like, that's the underground, that's where the people who run the park live down there. So the magnitude of the
live down there
the complexity of the whole place really was not lost on me, and the amount of design and energy, and obviously it's a huge undertaking. It always has been and always in. But just experiencing it as a child who ultimately became a designer and an artist, the impact of that trip still resonates with me. So.
At the very least, you guys could watch on, I've talked about this before, years ago, on Disney Plus. There's a series, it's called Imagineering or something about the Imagineers. And it's about that team of people that originally made Disneyland, and then how they ended up making Disney World, and all the stuff that they went through creatively to, not all the stuff, a lot of stuff that they went through to build these rides and create this park and all this stuff. And it's a really fascinating look at how much thought went into all that. But they do talk about the underground city thing a little bit. Basically, Florida's so low at sea level that they bought a county's worth of like 400 square miles or something. I don't remember exactly how much it is. A lot of square miles of land secretly. And then they wanted to build this park. They built all these shell companies to buy land from all these people, so nobody knew that they were buying it all at one time. and then they had this big mass of land, but it was swamp. And so then they built this city, tunnel system, and then put dirt on it, and then built the park on top of that. So when you actually are in Magic Kingdom, you are at least a story up above the rest of the ground. You can't tell that. And so all of that tunnel system is how they take a lot of the trash out of the park so that you don't see people walking along with trash bags so much. You do a little bit. They have like a transportation, like a little cars and stuff down there so that they can get from one place to another. So if somebody gets lost, an attendant will take them into this system and they get them to the place where they're safe very quickly. It's wild. It's wild, the amount of stuff that goes into that. And in that documentary, you can see a lot of it. But
yeah,
the thought and the care that goes into all the rides, even the rides, the ones that have been around since the 70s. There was this one we were on, it's called Thunder Mountain, and it's like you're on this old railroad track, and there's like explosive stuff everywhere, and it's like a camp where they're mining something. And so as you're standing in line, you're weaving through this old shack of a building that looks like it's on a mining camp. And there's all this design everywhere that makes you see the names of like coal miner, or not coal, but miners and all this stuff. And then there's this one area where you have this little crank, and it's on the wall, and it's looking out a window. And when you look out the window, you're looking at the ride. So it all looks like it's in California. It's rocks everywhere, and this roller coaster's going around. And there's pools of water and stuff. And this crank, you crank it up, and a little dial just goes over and hits this red area. And then when you do that, next to it, there's a dynamite...
A plunger box?
Plunger, yeah, that's the thing. And there's a bunch of these along the ride. And so what you do, they don't tell you this, but what you do is you crank it up till it gets to red, and then you hit the plunger, and water will shoot up out of one of the pools that's out there. They don't tell you about that. It's just you find little things like that they built in to just immerse you and make it fun and pass the time, and there's stuff like that everywhere. And it's like I was telling David before we started recording, my kids are now old enough that it's not a matter of like, oh, we got to go find a bathroom again. Oh, so-and-so wants snacks. Like, they're cool, Like, we had fun together. And we were walking around talking the whole time about, oh, did you see this little thing? Oh, did you notice this? And my kids were noticing things that I didn't see. And we had a really good time at Disney. A lot of fun.
Nice.
And I rode the Tron ride.
Is Thunder Mountain, I wanted to ask you, is Thunder Mountain based on a movie, isn't it? Like an old Disney movie? You might not. It's so irrelevant anymore, because I do remember that seeing that ride, and I do remember I think it has something to do with a movie called Thunder Mountain.
There could be. I don't know.
Yeah, but it's it's from the 70s. Now they probably realize the ride is more.
I know there's Splash Mountain, which was based on like the Brer Rabbit, Brer Fox Song of the South stuff, which they've like blacked out from history.
Yeah.
It's completely removed from all of their everything, and they're redoing that ride, so they're even taking out the remnants of it. But there's a Tron ride there, and
cool.
Tron's a movie from the early 80s, Jimmy.
I remember the video game. All my friends wanted to play the coin slot game.
Oh, yeah. So they built this light cycle ride, and in the movie, the characters are in the computer, and so they're driving these like motorcycles that leave like a beam of light behind them. Real iconic. And then a few years ago, 10 years ago, they came out with a sequel to it. So it's all modernized. It's even more neon-y and bright, and And the art direction of that movie is also pretty fascinating, because everything is black and neon. So it's black suits and blue glowing stuff, or black suits and yellow glowing stuff. The contrast is real high. And so they built this ride that follows that aesthetic. And so when you go in there, everything looks like it is straight out of the movie. And the canopy that covers the entire entrance to the walkway is covered with LED stuff that you can't see until it lights up. So there's these big waves of light, and just an amazing structure. And then we get inside this, you're in a black room with edge-lit acrylic everywhere that is animated, and screens behind things to add all this depth. And like, it was really immersive. Now, I'm a big Tron fan, like right behind Star Wars. I'm a big Tron fan. And so I walked into this room and just kind of was like, whoa. like, this is awesome. And it really, it's been a while since I've been in a place like that, like a complete setting that it inspired me. Like and it's, it's something I like, so I'm drawn to it. But I was like, I have to use this. This is amazing. Somebody went to leaps and bounds to make this right, to match the art direction of this movie. And yeah, it just really hit me. So I don't know what it is yet. I might know what it is, but something soon is going to come out of that immersive work that somebody else did, to make that ride what it was. So anyway,
it's really important that as artists we see other art. It's really the one thing that's. I said it in my TEDx talk that I did many years ago. Now, you got to see so much stuff; it all just comes into your brain. Even if it's not specifically art, but just interesting things that inspire you. You have to see so much of it, because then it regurgitates its way somehow. It goes through the mushmash of your artificial intelligence, in air quotes, of your brain, and then gets spit out later. Would that be considered real intelligence?
Like your brain's machine learning.
Yeah.
So you visited an art studio recently. I haven't heard about this yet.
Yes. Rachel, my girlfriend, is she's an art dealer. She's also an art consultant, which is a little bit, I'm learning, is a little bit more specific. An art consultant is somebody that comes to your house and decides what type of art you're looking for, helps you decide what to look for. And she says, unfortunately, there's a lot of filling this empty space. I want to fill this empty space, an architectural approach versus a real heart and soul approach. So she tries to balance that with her clients, and she placed a piece of Frank Stella's art with a client of hers, and she now has access to Frank Stella. You could look up Frank Stella if you don't know him. He's 87 years old. He wasn't at the studio. This was my birthday. She brought me in to visit with his people, and he has guys just like us that make a lot of his art now. He makes maquettes, and he does some work on the computer. He'll design things on the computer, and his work is extremely free-flowing. It's extremely abstract. He makes big, giant public sculptures at this point in his life. Obviously some private work, small stuff, big stuff, but it seems the majority of his work at this point in his career is all huge public art. So Rachel said, you have to come and look. So she dragged me over there to see it. She didn't have to drag me, by the way. I went willingly. I went willingly. And he experiments with all types of materials. He's been making art. In fact, to put it in perspective, how much experience he has, we were just looking him up a little bit the night before. She obviously knows him and has done tons of research on him, and she found a quote, and I don't remember the quote specifically. It more pertained to the conversation we were having. But he made this quote while he was, actually, as I recall, it was a quote about seeing art. But that quote was from 1960 when he was teaching at Pratt. So that's how far back this gentleman goes. So he has an amazing career. My experience with Frank Stella personally was in the 80s. I worked for a construction company, and they had a few contracts in the city while I was a student at the School of Visual Arts. I worked for this construction company that would hire me randomly from time to time when they had jobs. And one of the jobs we had was painting the walls in the Knoedler Gallery. So this is in 1986, 87. I was working with a group of painters, and we were painting the walls inside the Knoedler Gallery, which was a gallery that handled Frank Stella, Salvador Dali, and several other artists. And I got to see all this work up close. And I wasn't an art handler, so I didn't move it, but I got to intimately look at it between open hours. And we were painting the various galleries. And it was in a beautiful old building. Wasn't necessarily sort of like a industrialized storefront, but so we had to paint the incidental spots too. We weren't painting only the galleries; we were painting the in-between spots in the building. It was more like it used to be a home, and now it's a very, very wealthy home from like one of the big bankers in the 1900s, and now it's this gallery. And so that was my first experience with Frank Stella's art, seeing it up close. That was when they handled mostly paintings of his. Now it's all sculpture, big giant sculptures, and his work it's like a controlled chaos. His later works, the works that he's doing now. And he has a bunch of guys like me that work there and spray paint and do welding and plasma cutting. They have all the tools. It's crazy. It's in an old it looks like an airplane hangar. There's overhead cranes everywhere, and he bought the building 30 years ago. It's probably 75,000 square feet warehouse, and there's cars, cool cars everywhere. There's a Formula One car up on a shelf, like a real Formula One car. It's just insane. And there's maquettes everywhere because that's how he makes his art now. He makes the maquette,
cool.
and then you'll see a maquette, and then you'll see all the influence around that maquette sitting on the table, toys and such. And then as you walk through, you go through these different walled-off places, and there it is. There's the manifestation of that maquette that's sitting on a table near his coffee maker. It's crazy. And his guy who was showing us around is like, oh, that maquette was made in 1985. And it looks like it was placed there last week. So he keeps all this old artwork around him all the time. These things that inspire him. And then they manifest in these tremendous pieces. And there was all these pieces getting ready to be shipped. It's like, oh, this is going to Singapore. This is for the college such and such in Europe. And all these giant pieces everywhere getting ready to be created. And there was lots of crates, too. They have a very specific way of creating with planks, so the whole crate is made out of planks. It's the way they want to do it. Crazy. It's like a huge idea factory for abstract art.
Wow.
So, yeah, it was great. It was just to let you know that this type of work is possible. You know, and Rachel's been encouraging me to do more abstract work, and I've talked about it here. And yeah, so it was great.
Cool.
That was my birthday, April 3rd.
Yeah. Happy late birthday.
Thank you. I sent you guys some pictures of his stuff.
Yeah.
Yeah, crazy. In Newburgh. He's in Newburgh. So if you live in the New York area and you're driving around Newburgh and you see this giant airplane hangar with this crazy abstract art outside and also across the street, there's a big empty public land across the street. Wasn't being used for anything. So he and his crew placed several giant sculptures there in waiting to be placed somewhere in the world. And the town asked him to remove them in time. So he removed them. He lost this little court battle, and then they removed them. And then the town had such an uproar that people wanted the art back. So he moved it across the street, and then he moved it back across the street. And I say him. I mean, his name is on it, but these pieces they need cranes and crews to move them. They're tremendous. So anyway, so a lot of people in Newburgh probably driving around wondering what's going on there. If you don't already know, it's Frank Stella's art studio.
I'm so blown away by established artists and the infrastructure around them. So, like, I've watched this thing on Jeff Koons, and I've watched a couple documentaries on Daniel Arsham. I think that's how you say his name. And you think of them as a single person because they're just a name. But then when you see like their studio tour, there's like a team of 100 people working for them, doing all of the stuff. And there's like 20 pieces that are all being worked on at the same time by the artists, by the people helping the artists, and things being shipped. And it's such a weird business. I have this like complete disconnect from understanding how you actually make a living as a famous artist. Have you?
Yeah, I think we've talked about this before, but I've got two friends who used to work for Jeff Koons, and they lived in New York and were painters for him, and they're both incredible artists on their own, like unbelievable, you know. And they worked for him and just painted detail. Like a lot of his paintings are these like massive paintings with tons of detail. And so they would paint in, they would get kind of a rough idea or a sketch or something like that, and then they would go in and do this detail work at this really, really large scale. And something about that bothers me. And I know that there's argument for it or against it about whose work that actually is and whatever. But knowing the person and how talented they are, and then they're doing this work that someone else is getting kind of credit for as their art. Mm-hmm. Like, I don't know, something about that doesn't sit well with me.
I think
it feels like it should be a collective or something.
Yeah.
I don't know.
It's almost like this doesn't bother me much anymore, but when I was younger, and I didn't like artists who just went by their name. For example, Tom Petty or Bruce Springsteen, because I knew there were so many other people involved in that music.
Yeah.
And it just seems so weird. And then when you and I don't know any actual facts, but I'm just pulling this out of thin air, but when you think of somebody like Britney Spears, I just assume there's a team of Britney Spears is so not in right now, but it's the only name I can think of. But when I think of Britney Spears, I think of like there's a team of writers working on these songs to make hits, and it's more than just this name. And I don't know, it doesn't really bother me that much anymore, but it used to when I was younger.
Well, I think when it comes to a huge artist, for instance, Picasso or even Frank Stella or Richard Serra just died. Richard Serra does the big metal sculpture. He just passed away. And when you look at a Richard Serra, it's a 20-ton piece of sheet metal that's 3 inches thick. It's a giant chunk of steel that has like a subtle curve in it. And you think to yourself, what did he actually do? But he put in so many years of shop work and exploration to get to a point where his vision got bigger than his hands. And a lot of these artists is that you put in a career, a lifetime career, your vision becomes bigger than you. And and I think we all know, and I'm not saying it's right or it's wrong, when the ashes fall after the next nuclear fallout, people are only going to remember the work for the person who thought of it, not for the 100 people that put it together. And that, I think, is a lifetime of work in the shop, in the field, putting together your vision. And then when your vision becomes bigger than your hands, you need help. And then you get help, and that's when you have young up-and-coming artists. And I think it's sort of like, it's like a little bit of the, it's almost like the dirty underbelly of being a fine artist, is you have these studio assistants that help you create your vision, and they're passing through their career trajectory to get to a point where they can also have visions bigger than their hands. And so, like I said, it's a little icky sticky, because you have people that, and we talked a little bit about this before the thing started, whereas somebody might say, oh, you know, it'd be cool if you make it purple. And all of a sudden it's like, Jeff Koons was very genius. He decided to make this purple. What a great thought. Meanwhile, it was one of his studio assistants that maybe made it through the muck and the mire to get his vision out there. And then that person is the only person who could say to his friends and family, I was the one who thought of making it purple. And then you use that confidence to build your own career. So, like I said, it's a little like I said, it's a dirty underbelly of
I think in a very selfish way, I prefer. This is a terrible, absolutely terrible thing to say. I realize that, but I really want my artists that I love to be tortured alone in a room making that thing that they want to make. Like, I don't know how to explain exactly how I feel about it, but I want this to be like, I want their art to be so meaningful to them, to come out of pain or happiness. But really what we create is so much bigger than that, right? Yeah. I just grew up in the early 90s. Nirvana was my favorite band of all time. Like, I read and watched every single thing Nirvana. Yeah. And then like I kind of attached myself to that tortured artist making art for themselves, who can't handle the pressure. Yeah.
Yeah. But then that also, we're getting into the weeds here with the conversation, which is actually pretty good. The idea of having studio assistants versus having AI versus having CNC machines. So CNC machines are new studio assistants, at least in our community, where people go, oh, you didn't make that. You did. And I'm a bit of a firm believer in the idea that, see how confident I am? I'm a bit of a firm believer. I'm a firm believer. I'm nervous. I'm a firm believer in the idea that if you can think of it and you can direct it. It took me time to get to that. I didn't always believe it, but when you see producers and directors getting awards, and even Derek had this realization. He says, I used to watch producers and directors get awards at award shows and be like, that's not Marlon Brando. That's not Robert De Niro. They're the ones that made this. What are they doing? You realize that they're just brushes in their canvas, really. The producers and the directors who didn't do the acting and maybe in some cases didn't write the screenplay, but they're walking away with the Oscar because it was their vision, it was their. And then when we look back at our experience with our TV show, and every one of us constantly says it, the reason our Making Fun show is what it was is specifically because of Mike O'Dare, the guy who put the whole concept together and had a vision and put together all these different pieces of his personal experience together to make what we made. Obviously, we had a part in it, and a lot of the creative imagery was really brought up by us as the makers. But Mike put the fun and the edits together. So it's made by hand or made by mind. I think they're the same.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah,
I can accept that a lot more now than in my younger days.
Yeah, no. When I was an artist, and I was like. I remember thinking, Jeff Koons has studio assistants that do this stuff. He always wears a suit. He never gets dirty. He's not one of these artists you see struggling with dirty pants on. It's interesting.
Right.
Yeah.
And then to come to the realization of what that actually really means.
But at some point he probably was, right? I don't know anything about his past, but I would assume that at some point he was the one coming up with ideas and painting them and trying to figure out how to sell it and that type of stuff.
My friend actually did work for him as well. My friend did some casting for him early on. He was making small balloon animals for him, and he gave me a little bit of a history, which I could be totally wrong because this is 25 years ago. In my recollection, he was always more of a producer and less of an actual physical maker. I could be totally wrong there, but we can look it up.
Yeah. I'm gonna shout out my friend Matt, who is one of the people that I was talking about because he is an amazing artist. And you're talking about somebody who, gets dirty. His name's Matt Bober, and I'm going to put a link in the show notes to his studio show that is up right now. When you look at these paintings, here, I'll send you guys a link to it. You look at these paintings, and they look very, very realistic. The thing that doesn't translate when you're looking at these images is the size of the images in real life. And if you go over some of them, you can see them in frames on a brick wall, and then you see the scale of the picture. And then when you think about the detail at that scale, they're small paintings, but when you look at the amount of detail in them at the scale that they were painted, it is unbelievable. And we've hung out with him a lot in their house, in their studio. And, he's described how he goes about painting these things. And it's all from reference. He goes around and he buys all these, creepy old toys and just strange things. And he sets up still lifes that would never exist otherwise. And then he'll paint them. And they're unbelievable. They're unbelievable paintings. So anyway, give him a shout out because he and his girlfriend both used to work for Jeff Koons.
Well, I think it's also important, though, these studio assistants. It's really important as an artist that has a burning desire to do that large scale art. It's really important the studio assistant system is there so that you could get an up close and personal look and see how that works versus just I'm going to always only do my own thing. I'm never going to work for another artist. And then you're sort of an outsider. How are you going to break into the system? You could be working at a big studio, for instance, like Jeff Koons, and then meet any number of people that are extremely wealthy and famous, and you could develop access through any of these people. Being up close.
Oh, and I'm sure that being a studio assistant is a learning experience as well. I would guarantee they all walk out with more skills than they went in with.
Yeah, and then, like I said, not necessarily just for the art and the technical know-how, but the getting access to the people who would buy your art and knowing who those people are, what foundations are the foundations that spend money, how you get a college to buy a giant sculpture to put in their thing. I'm not saying I know any of this stuff, but I just know that being in that world is how you get access. Being a studio assistant is how you get access to these. I remember personally my experience. I met Richard Avedon when I was a student at the School of Visual Arts. I made this wooden box, and my teacher at the time worked with Richard Avedon on all the Revlon ads. This is in the 80s. And my teacher, her name was Yolanda Cuomo, She designs and makes books. I think she's still working in the city. And she was working on the Revlon ads at the time, and her and Richard Avedon picked Cindy Crawford to be the model in the Revlon ads. Well, maybe, I don't know. Anyway, she would do the Revlon ads. Cindy Crawford was the model, who was 20 years old at the time, and Richard Avedon was the photographer. And I brought in this box, and my teacher was so impressed with this box. She's like, "I'm working on a project with Richard Avedon. Can you meet me at his studio today and bring the box?" I was like, "Sure." So I met at Richard Avedon's studio, which was up the Upper East Side. He was there, sat down with him, and he had like 20 assistants bringing us everything. "Can I get you coffee? Can I get you?" And they were all fluttering around. Like it was like a thing. It was like a scene in a fashion movie. 10 people came up to him while we were talking for about 30 minutes. We were sitting at a table. We're going to use Ilford 400. Oh, that's great. We're going to do this. He didn't seem to have one stress in the world. Everybody else around him was like sucking up all the stress and being stressful. We're getting ready. What camera do you want to use? He said, "Oh, let's use the Hasselblad." Like he would just like answer every question real casual and chill. He was very, very nice. And it was a pretty incredible meeting. But that was really the first time I was in my second year art school, hanging out at Richard Avedon's studio, seeing all these assistants he had doing all the dirty work. But he had a career to get to that point. He had lived a lifetime of a career. He was extremely famous at that point. And then about 3 years later, I saw him doing a photo shoot in my neighborhood right outside my building. And I walked over to him and I said hello, and he remembered me. He was also very nice again. And he was photographing. And it was even funny. I remember that day. It was a cold day. He was standing there. He had like 10 assistants around him, a couple of models in and out of some model truck that was nearby. And he was standing there with his hands in his pocket. And I don't remember seeing him take a picture. He was just there as the director, telling whoever was pushing the button what to do. And he was directing the models. It was a cold day. He was wearing a coat in his hands, and everybody was cold. And his hands were in his pockets. He wasn't holding a camera. But it takes a lifetime to get to that point.
Yeah. That idea of being surrounded by that many employees that are not making decisions, but are executing.
Yeah.
And being unstressed about that seems really foreign to me, because I feel like that would be like, you have to be really successful, I think, for that scenario to not be stressful. That seems like a very stressful, a lot of moving parts and a lot of
that's
responsibility.
I try not to have too many people around me. I mean, I did have people around me when I had my toy production company with my brother. But it is stressful managing personalities. It takes away the fun in making art, which is why I keep it lean and mean. I try to.
Lean and mean. David, we never heard from you like what you were doing this week. You didn't go to Disney World, I know that.
I did not go to Disney World, no. This week we're just making something really, really simple. We're making a medicine cabinet for the other house, for the rental house. And we discussed this a few weeks ago, and trying to figure out what's the hook, and we were hidden storage, blah blah blah. And I just decided, you know what? I just want to make a dang medicine cabinet that's stupid simple, and so that's what I'm doing.
That's the one that's going to have the secret entrance into a Netherland,
right?
Open the other direction,
right? That'll be part 2 of the video. I just came to the realization, like, sometimes you just got to make something that doesn't have any hurdles. It doesn't have to have a hook. I just need to make something that needs to be there, and I'm going to make a video about it. So I'm not going to stress out about trying to get 1 million views on this video. I got other things to stress out about, like making the stupid finish that I've been
slaving. How's that going? The packaging looks beautiful, by the way. You posted the picture yesterday, right, about the packaging?
It does.
Yeah, I can make them in batches of basically 24, 25 kits at a time, and it's a lot of work.
Watch it be your most successful endeavor.
Well, yeah. It turned into a whole thing of, like, it's not easy to ship. So because it
it's
has
got volatile
hazardous
chemicals,
yeah, it has hazardous
supposedly.
materials in there, ethanol. So had to go through this whole thing of people were telling me I needed to be hazmat certified, so I found this course for $150, and then it has to be packaged in a certain way. The original, it was originally going to be packaged in a glass whiskey bottle, and this all started when I took some finish that I've been using the Maker brand finish for the last couple of years for a lot of projects, and it comes in a can, and I can never see how much is in the can. So I poured that can into a empty Jim Beam bottle. Now I can always see how much is in there if it's skinned over on the top or whatever. And then over a couple of years, that Jim Beam bottle got really patinaed with all this dry finish on the end. And so this whiskey bottle looks amazing. And so I wanted to carry over that theme into this finish that I'm developing. And so I bought a whole bunch of glass bottles with corks and going with the whole whiskey theme. And then after I didn't realize shipping was going to be so hard, the bottle's too big to ship, and it has to be under a certain amount of ounces, and the bottle was bigger than that. You can ship in greater quantities, but there has to be a metal container. And so, yeah. And so then I got to put it in a smaller 16-ounce container. And then I also had, it's like a cork cap, like a friction fit cap. And you can't ship anything with ethanol that has a friction fit cap. It has to be a screw cap that turns at least 1.5 times. There's all this other, I had to get some hazmat labels and go through all this stuff to ship this. It's been fun. And I hate shipping. And so I didn't want to be a factory. I didn't want to make this public. So I made a video going over all the ingredients that I use, giving you the exact recipe, encouraging people to make it themselves. You guys convinced me I should try to sell it. So I decided I'll sell it to just Patreon members only.
There you go.
Good job. Congratulations. I think that's awesome.
They're very pretty. I'm looking at them now. They're very pretty.
Yeah, it looks great.
Did you guys see that post this week? It reminds me because you said you were going to kind of make it confusingly, similarly marketed, like bourbon. A woman showed a thing of her mother. There's this olive oil based cosmetics company. Everything's based in olive oil, and the mother bought it and thought it was real olive oil, and she cooked the whole chicken dinner with shampoo that looks like an olive oil bottle.
Oh no.
And then the daughter comes in and goes, "Mom, this is shampoo." And there's a little tiny word on the bottle. It says olive oil this, olive oil that, natural olive oil. And there's a little word on it that says shampoo. And the mother had no idea. And then it shows the mother like cursing and being all annoyed after cooking this big, beautiful dinner with shampoo. So that's why labels are very important.
I mean, did they try it? It might have been good.
And on that note, I have a pet peeve. I need glasses, and when I take a shower at a hotel bathroom, they have the new pump bottles now. Every shower in every hotel has 3 pump bottles. One of them is conditioner, and I don't need conditioner because I'm bald. I need body soap or I need shampoo. And every single time, it's like luck of the draw. It's like, is it the first one that is not conditioner? Okay, let me go to the second one. That's conditioner. Usually it's in the middle, but it's not always in the middle. Always in the because I can't read those 3 little words on those 3 bottles. I need to take my glasses in the shower.
You don't. I was gonna say, you don't shower with your glasses on. Come on, man.
Or I always I get in a hotel room and I'm like, see where the conditioner is so you don't use it. Yeah. And I always forget to till I'm in the shower and the shower's running. My glasses are on. That's my pet peeve. Packaging is important.
Yeah, that is true. Well, I'm glad that it sold out, David, and I understand that it may not be something you want to keep on, but I think that's really cool that you made something that at least that many people wanted immediately. Yeah. They knew it was coming, they were looking forward to it, and they...
I can tell you where a lot of the stress comes from. When I announced in the YouTube video that I was only selling it to Patreon members at cost for testing purposes, I immediately, well, not immediately, but over the next week, I got like 25 new Patreon members. And that stress of like, oh my gosh, I'm a fraud. Oh. These people are buying into this, and it's not even proven. And then it sold out in 15 minutes. And I was posting on my Discord, and I'm like, imposter syndrome has totally kicked in. This stuff isn't even, it hasn't been thoroughly tested. What are you guys doing? And just makes me, success makes me nervous.
But they knew that, right? I mean, you were really clear about that.
I suppose, yeah.
Yeah, so they're, you can look at it, I totally get that feeling because I would feel the exact same way. But you can also look at it from the perspective of there's at least this number of people, there's a lot more than that, but there's at least this number of people who believe in my potential enough to help me test it.
Mm-hmm. That's,
it's not that they think you're the greatest thing ever, but they want to help you be what you actually are. And that's very cool. Yeah. So, well, good, man. I'm glad it's happening. Jimmy, you didn't really say what you'd been working on, I don't think.
What did I work on? I made the garden cart last week. I'm calling it the utility cart. I kept calling it the garden cart, but it's more of a utility cart for around the yard. And that was a fun video to make. And the thing has been getting used quite a bit. Today I'm going to use it a lot. We've been also working on the barn. I've been doing more Instagram stuff on the barn in the backyard. That's getting finished. That sat undone for a year, and now I'm putting a lot of time and energy into that. So there's going to be some videos coming out on the barn. And then a lot of people ask about the house, the graveyard house, which hasn't been worked on only because the winter has been pretty harsh. And where the house is, it's on a giant empty field that the wind comes whipping up. So to work there is impossible in the winter, unless you're used to building on Mount Everest. That's what it's like over there. So the winter was just a harsh winter in that particular area. So I'm not going to work in the winter. And now the spring is here. I'm going to get the graveyard house. I'm partially through the last video I was working on. I realized I looked at the footage the other day, starting to put that video together. And the last day I worked at it was December 27th. So a couple days after Christmas was the last time I was over there working. So if you asked me in my memory, I would have told you September, October. I didn't realize I worked on it that late in the season. Up here, January and February are usually the two roughest winter months. So now that the spring has sprung, I'm going to work on all the projects all the time.
No pressure.
Get it all done.
Yeah.
Oh, but did you guys see my giant bandsaw showed up? Did you see that on Instagram?
No.
Happen to see that? It is so big. It is so
yes,
big.
It is.
But it's not assembled yet. It came on a truck from Georgia, and it's in pieces, and it is humongous. The casting for the C-frame for the bandsaw, just the casting itself is 2,500 pounds, 2,300 pounds. And crazy. Then the wheels, it takes 2 4-foot diameter wheels, and the table's probably 200 or 300 pounds, the casted table. So all that's going to slowly start to be assembled. And Keith Rucker, who did a over 50 video series on restoring that bandsaw, he wants to come up and work with me putting it together. So we just have to schedule a time. He wants to, and I want to afford him that opportunity. I mean, my gut's like, I got it. I'll figure it out. But he put so much tender love and care into that thing, and I want him to be comfortable with the way it's set up. But before he gets there, I have to build a platform for it, because the wheel on the bottom of the saw goes through the floor, and I don't have a floor to put it on right now because all the rooms I would use it in are concrete, and I'm not ready to dig a hole in the concrete for the wheel. So in a factory setting in the 1880s when this bandsaw was set up, it would have been put in a on a situation where the hole would go through the concrete floor or the wooden floor. I thought about putting it in the graveyard house barn, but me and Rob looked at it, and I'm afraid it might not be strong enough, without some modification.
Yeah.
So, yep, that's I'm working on that. And this week I might experiment with, and I'm not breaking the bank on views, but the positive feedback has been overwhelming. My so-called new video style, where I'm showing more intimate problem solving and talking in the moment while I'm working on the design aspects and the problem solving aspects of it. People really responded to it, and it's nice to see. The videos are a little bit more interactive with the audience in the comment section. So this week it's a simple video, but I want to use my bending break that I have, and I may or may not be ready for this weekend, but because I haven't started yet. But it's a simple video. I could probably do it in 2 days, considering tomorrow and Friday. I'm going to design and make a metal stool. And I did it in the past. I did the Shaquille O'Neal stool, but that was based on an existing design. This is going to be more of a simple design. And for me, it's more about using the bending brake and solving problems with this bending brake that I have. And then hand hot rivets and stuff. So I kind of have a vision for this industrial style metal stool that will be made on the bending brake. So I'm going to go through the process of showing that design process, and then making the cutting paths for the Torchmate table, and then bending it on this big giant metal bender that I have. So that's where I'm at for this week. And I showed a little bit of on my Patreon. I made a little paper model of it, so they get to see that.
Cool.
Yeah.
Talking about spring and it, being warm enough to work. Before I left for Florida, I went out and just spent a couple hours. It was like maybe an hour and a half at the farm. Had to go mow for the first time this season. And so while I was there, I just did a little bit of body filler stuff on the Gia. I'm like, man, I haven't touched this thing in so long. Like, it's nice outside. And I mixed up a wad of body filler. And as soon as I started mixing it together, I'm like, oh, this is why you do it in warm weather. It was totally different than the frozen icing that I was doing in the winter when I was trying to make that video. This was just like, it was just like real fluid and buttery. And man, the two little areas that I coated in that hour that I was out there or whatever, just so much better. Like fewer bubbles. It went on smoother. It just, yeah. So I'm glad I didn't waste the winter trying to do that over and over and over. But it was also really nice just to get back to it and do, I worked on a small section. I didn't make a lot of progress, but now that it's warm enough and I'll be out there mowing and stuff on a regular basis for the next several months, I'm hoping to really make some progress on the body filler, because I really want to get that part out of the way. I still have a lot of metal work to do. Yeah, I still have a lot of metal work. I have to cut the entire back end bottom, like under the trunk. I have to cut that whole thing out and put in new panels on all that.
Whoa.
And so, yeah, and that's going to be hard to get lined up and hard to figure out what to replace in what order so that I don't lose my reference points and all that stuff. So the body filler just kind of feels like I just need to get this done and get it out of the way so I can get on to the actual difficult work. Body filler is difficult, but it's just more of the same. And I know it's just going to take me a long time. The thing I don't know about body filler is, how do you know when it's enough? How do you know when is going to look good? Because you're sanding a surface on top of another surface on top of primer, which is on top of metal. And so as you sand, it's not like it got smooth and glossy. It just gets harder to look at.
You got to look at it.
I really don't know.
You got to look at it down. My experience with Bondo is you could put Bondo on a dent, sand it, and then you sand too much, and then when you paint it, you look back, you could see the edges of the dent in a very, very light glare. So it's really important. If you guys have noticed, there's a lot of guys doing these dent repairs online, and they have these LED panels that only project lines. So when you put the light, when you shine the light on a glossy surface, you see the LED lines reflected, and they'll change contours over dent. And now you're talking about a shiny car, right?
Oh,
car with good paint on it. So those LED lines will go in and out of the dent, so you see the topographic map of that dent. And as they remove it, these guys specialize in getting out dents in painted cars, which is obviously a whole art in and of itself, without chipping the paint or cracking the paint. And it is incredible the work they can do. But I would imagine if you're going to do a car that is not painted, you might be able to wipe it with water, for instance, just to get it wet to see those same contours. But also just hit a body panel in the dark with a long shadow. Turn the lights way down and just take an Olight flashlight and shine it straight down the body panel. Lay the flashlight against the body panel, point it in the dent, and you'll be able to see shadows. If you've sanded too much Bondo or you haven't sanded enough, you'll be able to see the contours.
It's also why you need the longer sanding blocks. So you're not sanding the dent. You need to sand the whole panel with the long blocks.
And that the other day I saw, and I said this, I was with somebody, and I said, this is why you always need a long sanding block. And it was the guy sanding the side of a Lincoln, like a restored, like 1960s Lincoln Continental with the suicide doors. And he had a sanding block that was 6 or 7 feet long, and he was sanding the whole side of the car with 2 arms. And the sanding block was like 4 inches wide, but like 6 feet long across the doors and the body panels.
Ooh.
And there was a ton of Bondo.
I've never seen that.
Yeah, but he was just trying to get the whole side of the car with this one long shot.
It's like, I don't remember what we were talking about, but a long time ago on this podcast, in episode 122, you mentioned something about putting sandpaper on the bottom of a big sheet of plywood and then just running that over top of some panel. I don't remember what you're talking about, but that was one of your suggestions.
Yeah, years ago, me and I did all this Corian countertop stuff, and there was a whole bunch of connections. There was all these joins, so we had to do end-to-end Corian with like edge banding Corian. I made this whole countertop, and I had to smooth this intersection of all these panels, and this is where I came up with that similar idea. I was with David Welder, and we took a piece of plywood, sanded a bunch of 100 grit panels, glued a bunch of 100 grit, and we made this sled and piled weights on that sled, and just the two of us. I remember it was a hot day, and we were both dripping sweat like coal miners, sliding this wooden sled back and forth over this joint to smooth it out. And that's what really worked that whole joint down to get it smooth. That same type of thing.
That's pretty wild. And how did you then have to go back and polish that?
The Corian, then you so that was really just to break all the surfaces, to get all surfaces on coplanar, and then on top of that, then you go sand it with 300, 400, 600, 1200, and then you could bring it up to a gloss if you needed to. Yeah, Corian is such an incredible material to play with if you haven't played with it. It's great for CNC, and you can laser etch it for making. I use it for leather stamps a lot. But when you glue it together with the proper color, you can glue it together with the proper color epoxy. The seam becomes invisible.
Cool.
That's for if you're making a counter or a kitchen or reception desk or something.
Well, we had a topic, but we didn't really get to it, and we've been talking for a long time. So we'll just save it. That's cool with you guys.
Next week.
I will say, after we finish recording today, I am going to actually start I talked about it a couple weeks ago, like redoing my shop and the whole reorganization and everything. That starts today.
Oh.
I'm really excited about it. Yeah. It's the thing that I'm still kind of on the fence that we're trying to figure out is just the presentation of the thing, because I've got an idea. I've got kind of I don't want to say system, that oversells it a little bit, but like I'm thinking through a way to describe to myself, what do I want out of this space and how do I achieve it? And then I'm trying to apply that little system to each of the spaces and the shop as a whole, and then my office. And so I'm trying to make something that's like here's a little plan for organizing spaces for yourself. 3 steps to think about this, and then think about this, and then apply it to this, and then do it again, So, just figuring out how to present that in a video. It's going to be a lot of talking, but I don't know. I'm still kind of, but the other side of it is I'm just really anxious to start throwing stuff away and like cleaning and organizing and like
so good.
get it. Let's move it along. Yeah. So when we get done today, that's what I'm doing, which is pretty cool. Let me thank our Patreon supporters, and you guys can come up with something to share. I've got something pretty cool this week. Big thanks to everybody over at Patreon that supports the show. We are very grateful.
Thank you.
We don't really talk about the specifics of it a lot, but we don't take any sponsors on this show. We turn them down every once in a while. We don't have to worry about
They're
algorithms.
banging the door down, by the way. The sponsors are banging the door now.
We don't have to worry about algorithms feeding people this show. We don't have to chase that or anything. And that's because of the support on Patreon. So it really does mean a lot. That everybody over there that helps us
100%.
out at any level, it is very much appreciated. So thank you. These people the top supporters that go above and beyond are Nick Ryan, Corey Ward, Albers Woodworks, Works by Solo, Chad from Maincrafting, Chad's Custom Creations, Rich at Lowen Design, Odin Leather Goods, Sean Beckner, Scott at Dad It Yourself DIY, Jeff at the new Janky Workshop, Warren Works, Michael Manedjan, and Crabtree Creative. Now that group of people has been there for a really long time. I think Nick Ryan is the newest one, but even he's been there for
Nick was at my very first class we did here in 2016. Photography class, and he went to several subsequently, but his family started growing, and he can't come as much. But
wow,
Nick knows I love him.
But that group of people, they do go above and beyond, and so big thanks to all of them.
And I just got several comments. I just got several comments from Jeff at New Janky Workshop, so thank you on my other Patreon.
Oh, same here.
I'm looking at some of the other people that I don't normally mention, in show notes and stuff, like Jenny and Davis.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah.
Awesome. Thank you, guys.
Big thanks to them for sticking around since 2019.
Wow.
Wait, yeah, 2019. Yeah. Wow. Crazy. Anyway, if you want to help out the show, we would appreciate it. You can go to patreon.com/makingit. Everybody gets the after show at every level. So if you want that, you can go to Patreon. And if you don't want that, you don't have to listen to it. You can still go to Patreon. That's up to you. But you guys got anything to recommend this week?
I got Michael Jamin. Michael Jamin. And Michael Jamin got popular on Instagram, and he also has a podcast. But he's in California, and he's a screenwriter. He's written on several popular, famous shows. And he's got really good advice when it comes to the creative process of writing, mostly, specifically. But it applies to everything we do, one way or another. He's very open and honest and very transparent when it comes to writing for TV shows in Hollywood, specifically, but it's all applicable stuff to the creative process. Michael Jamin. His Instagram is very funny. He, like I said, his Instagram popped because of the writer's strike, and he was given minute-by-minute updates about what was going on and why and how and all that stuff, and the actors in the writer's strike. That's how I found him.
Interesting. Cool.
Mine is a YouTube video called A Map for My Inner Child. Have you guys seen this video?
Have not.
No.
So this guy named Jordan Studdard, he makes a map of New York City where he lives, and it's got a bunch of LED lights behind it. He took an old map, framed it. It's got a bunch of LED lights behind it, and each light represents like a famous, iconic place in New York seen in movies and television shows, like the Seinfeld restaurant, or there's like a couple dozen of these places within this map. And it's a really good video, and he's making this map throughout the video. It's only 3 minutes and 10 seconds, so it's not going to take long to watch. But it's a really good way to approach a video about making something and not have it be about making something. It's about the story of his childhood and making of them. It's just a very interesting way to make a video. You would think how I would approach it is, well, I took this map, I made this frame, I wired up. It's not about that. It's about the story, and it's just really good.
Cool. I'll check that out. Mine is from Corridor Crew, and it's a coincidence that it's Disney related completely. It just happened to show up for me yesterday. So this video is about a piece of technology that Disney came up with to make movies years ago, and they used it once or twice or something, and then it just like disappeared. And the short version of the idea is, you know, like green screen, blue screen. It's a colored background that then when you make the movie, you can key out that color and replace it with something else. And this has been done for years and years and years. But when you look at Mary Poppins, there's a lot of problems with that too. You can't wear the color that's being keyed out. It doesn't work with transparent things because the transparency and the color behind it is really difficult, whatever. When you watch Mary Poppins, you have transparency, you have lots of motion, you have water, you have all these things that shouldn't work, and they look perfect. And so they went on this quest to kind of figure out how they did that, and it turned out that Disney came up with this whole process for like a, I don't know what they call it. It's like a filter, but it filters out one very specific spectrum of light, and then they use that light color to light the background so that they can knock it out, and it's all in camera, and it creates two separate pieces of film that they can replace, and it's wild. But they recreate this, and the filter, it's not a crystal, but the filter or the whatever the thing is, the physical thing that they use to separate this light, they made like 3 of them, and then nobody knows where they are. They just disappeared.
Wow.
So Corridor recreates with this scientist guy. They recreate this thing to be able to do the same process now on footage, and they do a side-by-side between shooting this really complex thing on green screen and then they shoot it with this method. It's really cool. Like
this
stuff like this is
Corridor, the guys that do the cool computer stuff.
Yep.
Yeah, I'll check it out.
And so it's this weird intersection of, you know, film work and making, and they're always fun to watch anyway.
I thought for sure
anyway,
you were going to mention the Disney the ghost glass reflection thing that they were going to. It's in one of the it's in that show that you were talking about, and they have how they would project ghosts. Is this making any sense to you?
Yeah.
In the glass, like an angled glass. That's like an old magic trick.
Angled glass. So it looks like you have this like human sitting. So the chair's real. You see the chair, but then there's a piece of glass in front of you, angled just right, and there's some sort of image that's reflecting off of it, and you see this like transparent person sitting in this chair.
Yeah, I do remember that. That's not what I was talking about, but that is also cool.
Yeah, it's in that show that you mentioned earlier.
Yeah, the Imagineering thing. There's a lot of cool stuff like that. Like in that series where they talk about how they came up with, like on Haunted Mansion, the little globe that has a video of a head singing and stuff in it, like that. There's a whole name for that. Anyway, yeah, go check out the Corridor video. You guys got anything else for this week?
That's it.
Cool. Thanks for listening, everybody.
Thank you, everybody.
Okay. We'll catch you next time. You got it?
Oh, I love you.
Yeah.
Sorry.
People wait for it.